Book of Judges. All right, this follows right on the heels of Joshua. And in fact, the way the Jews recorded the Old Testament scriptures, actually Joshua Judges together was seen as viewed as one book, the first of the former prophets. As I've done in a couple of other occasions, the introduction from the Nelson King James Version Bible, I want to look at that. It does a good job laying out a bit of an overview. The book of Judges stands in stark contrast to Joshua. In Joshua, an obedient people conquered the land through trust in the power of God. In Judges, however, a disobedient and idolatrous people are defeated time and time again because of their rebellion against God. In 7 distinct cycles of sin to salvation, Judges shows how Israel had set aside God's law and in its place substituted that which was right in his own eyes. The recurring result of abandonment from God's law is corruption from within and oppression from without. During the nearly 4 centuries spanned by this book, God raises up military champions to throw off the yoke of bondage and to restore the nation of pure worship. But all too soon, the sin cycle begins again as the nation's spiritual temperature grows steadily colder. The Hebrew title is Sophatim, and in a Hebrew word, as it's transliterated, if it has the im, that is a plural form. So it's like we would add an s or an es, but im in Hebrew. But continuing, Sophatim, meaning judges, rulers, deliverers, or saviors. Sophat not only carries the idea of maintaining justice and settling disputes, but is also used to mean liberating and delivering. First, the judges deliver the people, then they rule and administer justice. This book could also appropriately be called the Book of Failure. And I thought that was a very insightful summary, the last sentence there, because we will see many, many failures throughout the course of the stories. No author is given for this book. And I'll just mention that the Jewish Talmud makes a statement that was written by Samuel. The Bible doesn't say, so we really don't fully know, and I don't think it's really central for us to know. Let me scroll this up. The dates, as the introduction mentioned, nearly 4 centuries. I would say probably closer to 325 years, maybe 350. But this is a book that records their trials and tribulations and, on occasion, deliverances. Approximate dates 1375 down to 1050. Book was probably written late in that time, close to 1050. Within years, Israel would have their first king, who was Saul. 3 reasons for the writing of this book. First of all is to record part of Israel's history. It covers the time from the occupation of Canaan. Remember how Joshua, the book begins, and they're making preparations for canvassing the nation, or rather the land of Canaan, and then the Red Sea was held back, and they actually, not the Red Sea, the Jordan River in this case, was held back, and they crossed over into the land that had been promised to Israel for a long, long time. So Judges transitions from the leadership of Joshua all the way to almost the time of the establishment of a kingdom, when the people went to Samuel and said, we want a king like the nations around us. So it's a history book. Secondly, it's a book about sin and its consequences. Sin always has its prices to pay. And in this book, we will follow continuing cycles of sin, then punishment, then repentance, and then deliverance. I have the Scofield Study Bible, and it refers to the cycles of sin as 4 R's: rebellion, retribution, repentance, and restoration. And then in our UCG Bible commentary on the book of Judges, it refers to these cycles as 4 S's: sin, servitude, supplication, and salvation. So I think any of those are good ways to look at it, the cycle. Then after God delivers, then after a period of rest, Israel in time repeatedly turns down the wrong path, the path to sin and disobedience. And then a third reason for the book, and that is it repeatedly stresses we cannot allow the world to remain in our midst, in our life. We cannot become comfortable with sin and just allow it to be there. The various tribes had been commanded to drive out the occupants, but they failed to obey God. In fact, God had told them he would drive them out before them if they would just continue to look to him in faith. But Israel suffered at the hands of oppressors many, many times due to their disobedience and because they failed to put their trust in God first. I want to look at a scripture in Exodus 23 with you. Exodus 23, and this is reading verses 31 to 33. This is right toward the end of 3 chapters there after the commandments are given. Exodus 21 says, now these are the judgments. And there are 3 chapters. Then it goes to the confirmation of the old covenant. But verse 31, and I will set your bounds from the Red Sea to the sea. And that would be the Mediterranean, Philistia. So that's from east to west. And from the desert to the river, for I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them, nor with their gods. They shall not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. And that is exactly what we find that they did. They did the opposite of what God had instructed them back in the days of Moses. So a couple of key messages of this book. On the one hand, God's judgment of sin is certain. There will be a time of accounting. There will be a price to pay unless there is repentance. And on the other hand, for those who truly go to God and repent, his forgiveness is equally certain. So we have little episodes, a few here, a few there, where they do turn to God, cry out to God, and they are forgiven, and then they forget what they had said they would do. If there is a summary verse, it would be the last verse in this book. It also makes a statement in Judges 17, verse 6. But Judges 21, verse 25 says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And that's a sorry commentary on the state of Israel at that time. Judges, the book, does not tell us how things should have been done, but how they were done. They did not follow God. It tells stories over and over of the price paid when a person or a tribe or a nation turned and departed from God. A bit of the historical setting, just again to remind ourselves of the events leading up to this. The nation of Israel has entered the promised land, the land of Canaan. Now, the date of the Exodus, the best we can determine, was 1443 BC. Then there was the 40 years paying the price of sin in the wilderness, bringing us to 1403 as the time when they followed Joshua, and began to occupy their land. But God had miraculously given them many victories as they conquered the land. There were peoples that were overthrown over on the other side of the Jordan. Taking full possession of the promised land, though, was incomplete when Joshua died. Joshua 13, verse 1, it says, "Now Joshua was old, advanced in years. And the Lord said to him, 'You are old, advanced in years, and there remains very much land yet to be possessed.'" Now, in many regards, Moses and Joshua were the first judges of Israel, because they held, remember how Moses's father-in-law, Jethro, told him, you're gonna kill yourself. You're gonna wear yourself out. You need to establish these captains of tens and hundreds and thousands and all of that. And then it's only the ones that the decisions they can't render that even come to you. But those two were judges. But after Joshua's death, there was no leader appointed to lead the nation. One man rule, so to speak, came to an end. However, God hadn't gone anywhere. God was still present to lead the nation. But sadly, the tribes turned down the path of apostasy and rebellion and sin, and paid a horrible, horrible price. So over the next more than 300 years, a judge or a military hero, a deliverer was raised up, one here, one there, different tribes. I'll show you a map from the Bible commentary in just a moment, and you can see these 12 judges were in completely separate areas of where the tribes were occupying. But it tells of 12 men and one woman. Now, I say 12 judges because generally Deborah and Barak, since they worked together, they are reckoned as one. And then 11 others are listed. But none of these individuals were perfect. Look at Samson. He was used in a mighty way, but he was sexually promiscuous. We'll see the story of the one, I'm even forgetting his name right now, who was basically an assassin and went over and killed the other king and gave the people relief. None were perfect, but at a certain time and place, each of them submitted to God's will for their work. Sometimes they had to be pulled into it, but still, deliverance came, and deliverance through these judges demonstrates God's continuing love and mercy to his people. As far as an outline of this book, there are three very clear divisions of the book. The first section would be chapters 1 through chapter 3, verse 7. Now, this material just kind of explains the history of the unfinished business of possessing the land, but it also begins to introduce the fact that the people were not following through. They were leaving some of the land unconquered. They were allowing some of the people God had said to drive out to remain right there in their midst. The second division being from chapter 3, verse 8, all the way through the end of chapter 16. I didn't make that distinction clear there. Chapter 3, verse 8 through the end of chapter 16, which is the end of Samson's story. We have the stories of these 12 different judges that God raised up. And then we have a bit of a different ending. We have the third division is chapters 17 through 21. We have 2 episodes that describe the sad condition of Israel, the spiritual, moral, political decline of the whole nation. You have the story of the Micah and the setting up of the counterfeit holy place or place to worship, and being taken over to then the area of Dan. There also is a story of the Levites and the Levite and his concubine and her death, and how the tribe of Benjamin was almost exterminated because of that. So anyhow, these 3 divisions, and hopefully we can look at the first one tonight after we look at this chart. In the Bible reading program, if you find it and follow it to Judges, the first chapter has introduction in chapter 1, but it also has this map. And I can't get all of it to show on my screen, but this shows the judges, the locations of the various judges. So chapter 3, verse 8 is going to start telling the story of Othniel, who is the younger brother of Caleb. And he's here in the tribe of Judah. Then there's Isban, chapter 12, Samson, chapters 13 through 16, Ehud, Deborah, Barak working with him, Abdon, Tola, Jephthah, and then let me scroll back up, Gideon, Jair, Elon, and then all the way up here you have Shamgar up in the northern part of Naphtali. So as you can see, they are scattered all over the tribes, the basic land of Canaan, but also the tribes that received inheritances on the other side of the Jordan. So a little here, a little there. There would be oppression when the people are crying out to God. God would lift up a tool like Gideon, and he would give a deliverance. So again, I think it's good to notice they're scattered all over the territory of the various tribes. Now, notice down here at the bottom, Judah, the territory of Judah is in the green. Notice landlocked in the middle of it. So completely within the borders of Judah, you have Simeon. Now, Judah and Simeon were full-blood brothers, as they were children of Jacob through Leah, the 4 that she bore. So anyhow, let me take this down, and I'm going to put the Olive Tree Bible up on the screen. Okay, can you see there the book of Judges on the screen? Okay, great. That's good to know. Let's go ahead and get started then in, let's see, let me scroll down beyond the introduction. Again, we have chapters 1 and 2, and then the first 7 verses of chapter 3 that provide the introduction. And one of the first orders of the day is to ask the question, well, who's going to be the first to go forth to begin occupying the land? And so verse 1, after the death of Joshua, it came to pass that the children of Israel asked the Lord, saying, who shall be first to go up against the Canaanites. And so the Lord said, Judah shall go up. Now, it doesn't tell us how that is revealed, but as you will remember, the priest did have the Urim and Thummim, where they were to go and to make a request of God, and through whatever means God's will was rendered, the territories were actually divided out by the casting of lots. So probably the Urim and the Thummim, or maybe by the casting of lots, that God made his will known. Now in verse 3, so Judah said to Simeon his brother. Again, you saw on the map where Simeon's territory is completely encircled by Judah's. And again, I think probably there was a closer tie, as the four born through Leah are full brothers, and they're older than the others, and quite a bit older than Joseph and Benjamin. And so Judah said to Simeon his brother, come up with me to my allotted territory, that we may fight against the Canaanites, and I will likewise go with you to your allotted territory. So they made an agreement. You come help me in the battle, and then when we get to that point, we will go help you go into battle and take possession of your land. In verse 4, Judah went up, and the Lord delivered the Canaanites and Perizzites. You know, there are like 6 different groups that are mentioned, and I was checking the archaeological study Bible, and they just made the comment that, you know, it's just really, we're not able to fully ascertain exactly where these different groups were, but these were the various peoples living in what was the promised land for Israel. So at Bezek, they were given a great victory in battle. They took the king, Adonai Bezek. Now that's actually, that's a name, just means Lord of Bezek. So it's not really a personal name, but he was the king. And so they took him, caught him, cut off his thumbs and big toes. So without thumbs, you can't fight against your enemy any longer. He fled. They pursued him. Let's see. Adonai Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and big toes cut off used to gather scraps under my table. As I have done, so God has repaid me. Then they brought him to Jerusalem, and there he died. So he's paid for his own works. He is cursed with what he had done to so many others. So verse 8, Judah fights against Jerusalem and took it, struck it with the edge of the sword, set it on fire. Now there's more to that story. The Jebusites were the ones who inhabited the city of Jebus, which was the earlier name of Jerusalem. They retreated to a citadel there at their city, and they actually were never completely routed. They later took the city back over, and it wasn't until the time of David that we find that the armies of Israel were able to go and completely drive them out and fully take the city and make it the capital of ancient Israel. Okay, verse 9, afterward the children of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites who dwelt in the mountains in the south, in the lowland. Verse 10, they went against the Canaanites who dwelt in Hebron. Now the name of Hebron was formerly Kirjath Arba. They killed Shishai, Haman, and Talmai. Now down to verse 20, notice it says, and they gave Hebron to Caleb as Moses had said, Then he expelled from there the 3 sons of Anak. So Hebron was the headquarters of where Anak and then the giants, the Anakim, the giants lived there. And verse 20 mentions expelling the 3 sons of Anak. So these 3 names at the end of verse 10 are probably the names of these 3 sons. So verse 11, from there they went against the inhabitants of Debir, formerly Kirjath Sepher. Caleb said, whoever attacks the city takes it, I'll give my daughter as wife. Verse 13, Othniel, son of Kenaz, he's a brother of Caleb. Caleb's younger brother took it. So Caleb, gave him Othniel, his daughter, as wife. And then it tells where she urged her father, she asked for an inheritance and urged him for a field, and then asked him, it's a very dry, arid land, so asked him for springs of water, and that was given. Now, as we, especially this first couple of chapters, there are stories that are actually being retold that took place while Joshua was still living. And so it's a little bit, I would call them complementary, not really in conflict, not really 2 different versions, but there's repetition at times. Now, verse 16, children of the Kenite, Moses, his father-in-law, went up from the city of palms. City of palms. In fact, here's a note. The south, the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees. So the city of palms was Jericho. Now, Jericho, of course, as the occupation began, Jericho was destroyed. This is years later. The old city was in ruins and still is, but there was a settlement near that area. Okay, they go down to the wilderness of Judah. Verse 17 is where Judah went with his brother Simeon, and they attacked Canaanites who inhabited Zephath, or Zephath, and utterly destroyed it. The name of the city is Hormah. Judah took Gaza, so Judah took the area of the Philistines along the coast. Gaza, Ashkelon, Ekron, those are some of the royal cities of the Philistines. Verse 19, so the Lord was with Judah, and they drove out the mountaineers. So sounds good, but we begin to see it's not complete. The ones in the mountains, they could go to battle against them. They drove them out, but they could not drive out the inhabitants of the lowlands because they had chariots of iron. And so apparently they began to fear. It began to, as has happened a number of times already, we can't fight them. They've got weapons we can't compete with. Well, later on under Deborah and Barak, we'll see what happens, what God does when you let him fight for you, and the rains, the floods, the chariots that got bogged down, and the great victory was given. So they gave Hebron to Caleb, as Moses had said, expelled the 3 sons of Anak. Verse 21, but the children of Benjamin. So Benjamin is a smaller territory, long and narrow, just above Judah, and Jerusalem was on the border with those above it in Ephraim. The children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites who inhabited Jerusalem, so the Jebusites dwell with the children of Benjamin in Jerusalem to this day. That was when possibly Samuel was writing the book. maybe just years prior to Saul becoming the first king. The Jebusites were still there. Verse 22, and the house of Joseph went up against Bethel, and the Lord was with him. So the house of Joseph sent men to spy out Bethel. It mentions the name of the city formerly was Luz. Now, there's a long, long history with this area of Bethel. This is what? North of Jerusalem, 6 or 8 miles. Ai is quite close. Long history there. In fact, Abraham was there. God appeared to him in the area of Bethel in Genesis 12, that initial time when he told him, I'm going to give you this land. Jacob was there in his travels. Actually, prior to this, it was called Luz, L-U-Z. And Jacob is the one who renamed it Bethel. Bethel being a name Bet, or Beth meaning house in Hebrew, house of El, house of God. So he renamed it. It was there where he laid down. He saw the vision, the angels ascending, descending from heaven, and he thought he was there at the access point to God's throne. Also, later on, with the divided kingdom, there was a golden calf. The golden calf that Jeroboam had placed there, probably to keep those of the northern tribes from going all the way down to Jerusalem to keep the feast. And then, let's see, it was also in the days of Elisha. It was near there where the children came out and said, go up, you bald head, and the 2 she-bears tore into a number of them. So Bethel has a long, long history. House of Judah sent men to spy it out, and they found someone, said, please show us, wanted to find out how to access the city. The man showed them. They let him go, and he moved off and built another city and named it Luz. Continuing, verse 27. We have the rest of this chapter. Basically, I think I counted 9 different tribes are mentioned, that this tribe did not drive out everyone and this one did not. So here is Manasseh. They did not complete the job. They didn't drive out the inhabitants of Megiddo, and that had become, or has been, a place fought over all through the years. Let's see, they did put the Canaanites under tribute, but they did not drive them out. Verse 29, Ephraim did not drive out the inhabitants. Verse 30, Zebulun didn't drive out the inhabitants. 31, Asher did not drive out the inhabitants. Now, Asher has that area way up to the north and against the Mediterranean from around the area of modern day Haifa. Going up north, there's Akko, and then you go up toward the ruins of Tyre and on. That was the area of Asher. They did not drive out the inhabitants of Akko. Let's see, 33, Naphtali did not drive out all of the inhabitants. So I won't go into all these details. A lot of these cities, a person could make a study trying to follow the map to find out where they were, but I think we'll just skim over that. Verse 34, the Amorites forced the children of Dan into the mountains, for they would not allow them to come down to the valley. And of course, the children of Dan received a deliverer named Samson later on, and anyhow. And let's see. I think that's all we'll comment on from chapter 1. But let's go to chapter 2. Israel's disobedience. Here, God begins pointing out to them, you are not doing what you promised you would do. Verse 1, then the angel of the Lord. came up from Gilgal. Originally, remember that's where the tent of tabernacle was placed, to a place called Bochim, and said, I led you up out from Egypt and brought you to the land which I swore to your fathers. I said, I will never break my covenant with you. Verse 2, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land. Well, that was exactly what Israel was beginning to do. You shall tear down their altars. Well, they not only began the process where they were not tearing down their altars, but they were keeping their gods, and then they were incorporating the worship of those gods into the Israelite life. You have not obeyed my voice. Why have you done this? Now, I should comment, the angel of the Lord, this is the one who led them out of Egypt. So we're dealing here with, in this case, the God of the Old Testament. The God of the Old Testament. So it was, verse 4, so it was when the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the children of Israel, that the people lifted up their voices and wept. And actually, Bochim, let's see, here's a footnote. Bochim literally means weeping. So it was named for this event. They lifted up their voices and wept, the place called Bochim. They sacrificed to the Lord. Verse 6, and when Joshua, see, here's a key. This is one where it's a retelling, or it's a copying of an event that took place back when Joshua was still alive. When Joshua had dismissed the people, the children of Israel went each to his own inheritance to possess the land. Now, let me click on this link. Yes, so Joshua 24:28. So Joshua let the people depart each to his own inheritance, and then it tells of the death of Joshua. So, again, corresponding story to what actually happened while Joshua was still alive. Then we move to 4 verses here that deal with the death of Joshua. So again, it's kind of overlapping stories to a degree. So the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen the great works of the Lord, which he had done for Israel. And it mentioned Joshua, son of Nun, was 110 when he died. Tells where they buried him. Verse 10, when all that generation had been gathered to their fathers. So in other words, they joined their fathers in their tombs, in their graves. When they died, another generation arose after them who did not know the Lord, nor the work which he had done for Israel. So here is a very definitive statement. We have had a turning place. The people who remembered God and God's mighty works are dying off, and a young generation is arising, and they don't know. They don't know. Therefore, how can they believe? Verse 11, section here, the Nelson Bible calls Israel's unfaithfulness. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. It's amazing how little time it takes. All any Christian has to do is just give up. Stop studying, stop praying, stop obeying, and it is amazing. It is frightening how quickly human nature reverts back to what God had called us out of. They served the Baals. Verse 12, and they forsook the Lord God of their fathers who had brought them out of the land of Egypt, and they followed other gods from among the gods of the people who were all around them, and they bowed down to them, and they provoked the Lord to anger. So they were doing the very thing that they promised they would not do. They forsook the Lord and served the Baal and the Ashtaroths. Ashtaroth is a female, a Canaanite goddess. So the Canaanite gods and goddesses are pictured here. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. So he delivered them into the hands of plunderers who despoiled them. He sold them into the hands of their enemies all around. They could no longer stand before their enemies. See, again, remember, they had a promise that, just a few of you will chase 1,000. And now they can't stand before their enemies. Wherever they went, the hand of the Lord was against them for calamity, as the Lord had said, and as the Lord had sworn to them, and they were greatly distressed. Verse 16, we are introduced to the concept of these judges. Nevertheless, the Lord raised up judges, and that's where we have that word, that Hebrew word we saw. They not only rendered decisions, but they also were the administrators, kind of the civil leaders. They certainly had the Levites and the priests still. Judges who delivered them out of the hand of those who plundered them. Yet they would not listen to their judges, but they played the harlot with other gods and bowed down to them. They turned quickly from the way in which their fathers walked in obeying the commandments of the Lord. They did not do so. So their fathers had obeyed the commandments. They are not doing that now. Okay. When the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge and delivered them out of the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning because of those who oppressed them and harassed them. Verse 19, and it came to pass when the judge was dead, that they reverted and behaved more corruptly than their fathers by following other gods to serve them and bow down to them. They did not cease from their own doings, nor from their stubborn way. Here is a pattern. We've got a lot of beginnings here. We have an ongoing pattern where people are putting God out of their nation, and God is pulling back his protection. He's no longer fighting their battles. They're turning further and further from the true God to the false gods of the people around them. And then they revert and behave more corruptly than their fathers. And that's something that you'll remember with the history of the kings of Israel. It'll mention a certain wicked king, and this one did worse than all the kings before him. And then later, here's another one, and he did worse than all before him. And as the king went, so went the nation. Verse 20, then the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he said, because this nation has transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and has not heeded my voice, I will also no longer drive before them any of the nations which Joshua left when he died, so that through them I may test Israel, whether they will keep the ways of the Lord to walk in them as their fathers kept them or not. Therefore, the Lord left those nations without driving them out immediately, nor did he deliver them into the hand of Joshua. Chapter 2 ends. It's a very sad, tragic, bleak picture. But we see a story, a pattern that's going to play out many, many times through the judges and then also in the era of the kings. Let's notice the first few verses of chapter 3. The nations remaining in the land. Verse 1, now these are the nations with which the Lord left, that he might test Israel by them, that is, all who had not known any of the wars in Canaan. Verse 2, this was only so that the generations of the children of Israel might be taught to know war, at least those who had not formerly known it. So they're being tested, but also a younger generation has grown up that hasn't had to learn how to go into war. And they're going to have plenty of opportunity to learn it now. Verse 3, namely 5 lords of the Philistines, all the Canaanites, the Zidonians, the Hivites who dwell in Mount Lebanon, from Mount Baal Hermon to the entrance of Hamath. Verse 4, and they were left that he might test Israel by them, to know whether they would obey the commandments of the Lord, which he had commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. Verse 5, thus the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And they took their daughters to be their wives, and gave their daughters to their sons, and they served their gods. One more verse. So the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and Asherahs. Next time, that's going to lead us to the first judge God lifts up, and that is Othniel, younger brother of Caleb. But we come to this point, and it is, I think, of value to point out that from this particular place, we find no more any national observance of the law that God gave through Moses. The high priest is never mentioned again through the book of Judges. Worship at the tabernacle will not be mentioned anymore. There will be this man named Micah and the Levite and getting him set up, but that's about as close as we get to anything connected to a tabernacle worship. We find only the faintest understanding of what Israel had been given, and even the stories, the history of Israel, the victories God had given through Moses and Joshua, and how quickly we forget, how quickly indeed. Actually, I suppose we should just go ahead we can look at Othniel here anyhow. Othniel, remember, from Judah, he's down below Hebron. Verse 7, so the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and Asherahs. Therefore, the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of, and there's a mouthful, Cushan Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. I thought I had a note written here. Cush of double wickedness is basically how it translates. Cush of double wickedness, king of Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is the area that Abraham and others had come from, the land between the rivers, Tigris and Euphrates. And the children of Israel served this man 8 years. When the children of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for the children of Israel who delivered them, Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. So 8 years is not a long punishment compared to some of the stories we're going to see. But again, this is still early on. This is still that first generation after Joshua. So there is still quite a bit of knowledge that will be lost in another couple of generations. Verse 10, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he judged Israel. He went out to war, and the Lord delivered Cushan Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hand. And his hand prevailed over this king. So the land had rest for 40 years. Then Othniel, the son of Kenaz, died. I have a chart I want to work on a bit more, but some of these ended up in rest for a long time. Othniel, after his judgeship, they had 40 years of rest. The next one we're going to have is Ehud in Benjamin, and after his deliverance, there'll be 80 years. So we have vast amounts of time being covered. Some of them, like Shamgar, we're not told how much rest they had afterward. But after Deborah and Barak, there were 40 years of rest. After Gideon, another 40 years of rest. But again, remember, these are in different places in the tribes of Israel, and so very easily a lot of these can overlap each other. Tola, again, these are names we'll see as we go through it. 23 years of rest. Jair, a crossover east in Gilead, 22 years after his deliverance. Jephthah in Gilead also, 6 years rest. Isban in the tribe of Judah, 8 years rest. Elon in Zebulun, 10 years rest. Abdon in Ephraim, 7 years rest. And then finally Samson, the last judge of whom we're given the story. And after the time of Samson, the tribe of Dan in that area had 20 years of rest. So let's look here at Ehud. And Ehud is from the house of Benjamin. Verse 12, the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. The Lord strengthened Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel because they had done evil. Gathered himself to the people of Ammon and Amalek. So you had several peoples got together and defeated Israel and took possession of the city of palms. Again, that's Jericho. So the children of Israel served Eglon 18 years. Verse 15. So again, we have these never-ending cycles. Sin leads to punishment or oppression. And in time, that leads to repentance and crying out to God. And then in time, God hears their cry and lifts up a deliverer. So the children of Israel cried to the Lord. The Lord raised up a deliverer for them, Ehud, the son of Gera, the Benjamite, a left-handed man. By him, the children of Israel sent tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now, this Ehud appears to be nothing but an assassin, but God used him. You scroll up a bit here. Now, Ehud, so he's taking tribute money from Benjamin to pay to the king of Moab. He made a dagger, double-edged, a cubit, 18 inches in length, and fastened it under his clothes on his right thigh. So he's left-handed, and he would reach across to pull it out. So he brought the tribute. Now, Eglon was a very fat man. So he must have been eating a lot of his own tribute. When he had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who had carried the tribute. But he himself turned back from the stone images that were in Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. He said, keep silence. And, he dismisses everyone who was attending him. Verse 20, so Ehud came to him. He was sitting upstairs in a cool private chamber. Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. He arose from his seat. Ehud reached with his left hand, took the dagger from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. even the hilt, so that's the end, the handle end, went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not draw the dagger out of his belly, and his entrails came out. It's not a very pretty picture. Very, very, very disgusting story. Then Ehud went out through the porch, shut the doors of the upper room behind him, and locked them. When he was gone, it took a while for his servants to come, and the doors were locked, and so finally they took a key and got in. The end of verse 25, their master was there, fallen dead on the floor. In the meantime, Ehud had escaped, passed beyond the stone images, blew the trumpet in the mountains of Ephraim. The children of Israel went down with him. So again, we've got several, 2 or 3 tribes here involved. And he led them. Then he said to them, "Follow me. The Lord has delivered your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand." They went down after him, seized the fords of the Jordan, leading to Moab, and did not allow anyone to cross over. At that time, they killed 10,000 of Moab, all stout men of valor. Not a man escaped. Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest 80 years. So that's a brief look at our first 2 judges, Othniel and Ehud. But we will stop right. Well, yeah, we'll stop right there, and there's just one verse that is given for Shamgar. And we'll pick it up with Shamgar, Deborah, Barak, and others next time. So let me